All right, the command prompt is how you access the DOS prompt. DOS really isn't there anymore, but a lot of people call it the DOS prompt still. But it really is a command prompt for Windows. You can run the command prompt by typing command.com, which is the 16-bit version, or cmd.exe, which is the 32-bit version, and that's also the recommended version. So to run the command prompt, you can go to Start, Run, type cmd for command, press enter, and you get this Microsoft Windows XP command prompt. And from here you have your C:\\, prompt, which tells you what directory you're in. Right now I'm in the C:\, documents and settings / David Davis directory. So you might be thinking, well, if I have Windows, I have all these graphical, icons and menus I can click on, why would I want to run the command prompt? Well, sometimes there's certain tasks that you just have to do at the command prompt. Now, for most users, they never get into the command prompt at all. They have no idea what to do. But as an A+ technician, it's very important to know what the command prompt is and just know the basics of how to get around it. So let me hit on some of those basics. First off, the command that you should know is help. If you type help, you get a list of all the common commands that are built into the command prompt. Now, these aren't all the things that you can do from the command prompt. For example, if I scroll up here and look in the C's, there's no program here called calc, C-A-L-C for calculator. There is C-A-C-L-S for ACLs to control access lists, but there's no calc. If I scroll down here and I type calc, C-A-L-C, that starts the Windows calculator. So that's a graphical program being started from the command prompt. And really, you can start any graphical program from the command prompt. So if I close that out, if I type WinWord or Windows Word, WinWord is not recognized. Now, the reason it's not recognized is because it's just not found. If I went to the proper directory and found WinWord, which is Microsoft Word, I could start it from the command prompt. Whatever you run from the command prompt is typically the same things that you can run over here from the run prompt. But based on paths, you might not always be able to find the program that you're trying to run. So what I mean by that is if I type WinWord over here, it starts up Microsoft Word. Whereas if I go back over here and I type WinWord, it doesn't work. And the reason for that is just the paths. A path is where Windows goes to look for the command that you're telling it to find. So it knows, obviously, where to find the calc program, the calculator, but it doesn't know where to find the Windows Word program. Paths are a little bit more complex, and we'll get into that more in the more advanced videos. But for now, let's just look at some of these more common command prompt commands. For example, let's type time. Time tells you what the current time is, and it prompts you to set the new time. If you don't want to set new time, you can hit enter, and you're returned back to the command prompt. I can type date. Same thing, tells me the current date and asks me to enter the new date. If I don't want to do that, I just press enter. I can type ver for version and press enter, and it tells me the version of the operating system. If we scroll back up here, let's see what other commands are useful. There's a lot of file level commands. For example, the most common command that everyone should know is dir, or directory. If I type dir and press enter, it shows me all the commands or files or folders in this directory. CD is change directory. So if I type CD and press enter, it just changes directory to the current directory. If I type CD and then \, it takes me back to the root of this drive, the C drive. So here I can type dir, and it shows me the different files that are on this or inside this folder. I can type CD and I can change to a directory like CD Windows. Press enter and I'm in the Windows directory. Here I can type dir and I get a long list of all the different files inside this Windows directory. Let's go back to the bottom. And let's see, other commands might be del for delete, mkdir for make directory, rmdir for remove directory, rename. Let's type help. Let's see, rename right here. That's another command to rename a file. If I go up here, copy, there's copy to copy a file. A lot of different important commands here that you should know. CLS clears the screen. Let me type CLS. There we go. Clears the screen. A lot of great things you can do. Now, each one of these commands has their own options. So if I type dir slash question mark usually tells you the options for that program or that command. So if I press enter there, it tells me what this command can do. Dir displays a list of files and subdirectories in a directory. And then here's the command syntax. Dir, drive, path, file name. Some of those are optional. Slash, and then here's the different options. Slash A, slash B, C, D, L, N, O, P, Q, S, T, W, X, and 4. And then down here it explains what these different options do. So, for example, slash P pauses after each screenful of information. And notice how it is pausing after this screenful of information, asking me to press space or any key to continue. I'm going to press space, and it shows me the remainder of the options and then puts me back at the command prompt. So let's try out that dir slash P. So it showed me the first page of information. It paused and says press any key to continue. I'm going to press a key, and I can keep pressing a key here, looking at one page at a time, so that I can see all the files that are in this Windows directory without them just flying by, without me getting a chance to look at the files. With slash P, I can pause and I can look at each page full of files. So that's just an example of what these command options can do. Sometimes they're very useful, and you learn a command option and you use it every single time. Other times there's command options and you say, well, I'm never going to use that. But it's good to know what they are, and if, maybe somebody else comes to you one day and says, hey, do you know the command option to do such and such? And you can say, hey, yeah, I do. Or if not, tell them, hey, type dir slash question mark, and you'll find out what the command options are. So this is the DOS prompt. You learned a little bit about the different commands and the different programs that can be run, and then the different options and how to get access to help, most importantly. So to exit the command prompt, you type exit. Type exit and press enter, and it's gone away. Next thing we're going to talk about is My Network Places. My Network Places is where shared computers on your network are going to be displayed, as well as their folders, their files, or their printers, or any other resources they might be sharing on the network. And these are only as recognized by Windows. So these are recognized systems that Windows sees. So for example, say you put a Mac on the network, or you put a Linux server on the network, or a router, or some other network device. They're not just going to show up at My Network Places. My Network Places only contains devices that have the Windows operating system and are communicating that they're available on the network so that your Windows computer can see them. So don't just expect everything on the network to magically appear in My Network Places. Most Windows systems will automatically appear in there, but not always. Let's take a look at this My Network Places. If I minimize this and I go to My Network Places right here, this icon shows a computer with a globe. I'm going to double click on that, and mine's empty right now. I don't see any other computers in my network places. I can go into View Workgroup Computers, and it searches out on the network to see if there's any other workgroup computers available. And we'll see if we find any or not. It could take a little bit. And it does show me Client 1. Client 1 is actually my computer. So if I go into Client 1, here I'm accessing my own computer through the network. So you can see here that I have my C drive shared. This is my root hard drive. If I go back up, I have a couple printers shared, a shared docs file shared, and then this would show all my printers and faxes on the network, and all my scheduled tasks are available to be shown out to someone else. So if you had other computers in your work group, or if this computer was a member of a Windows domain with a server, then you would see all the other computers in the work group or in the domain inside My Network Places. So just an example of what My Network Places is. If I close it, another useful purpose for My Network Places is if you right-click on it and you go into Properties, you can view all your different network adapters. So here's my dial-up adapters, here's my LAN adapters, here's my VPN adapters. I can change my Windows firewall settings. If I go up here to Advanced, I can change my network identification, which really just brings up system properties that we already looked at, and goes to the computer name tab. I can do some other things here, like set my advanced networking settings. A lot of different things I can do. If I double click on my local wireless adapter, which is what I'm using to communicate on my network, if I double click on that, it shows me the status of it, that it's connected. It's been up 10 days. Here's the current speed and the reception. I can go to support and I can see my IP address, default gateway. I can see my DHCP server, DNS server, and so on and so forth. We'll be talking more about this in the networking portion of this video series. All right, next up is the taskbar and the system tray. These show the running programs and certain user-oriented background applications. So the taskbar is this blue bar down here. We already talked about the taskbar. Shows you what current programs are open and running on your computer. Right now I have just this OneNote document is the only thing I have open. That's the only thing open down here in the taskbar. These over here, these are just quick launch, so they're not running. They're just buttons that can start applications very quickly. What we didn't really talk about is the system tray. This area over here, this is called the system tray. And this icon that's flashing, that's my recorder that I'm using to record this video. So right now that's the only icon shown in the system tray, but if I expand this out, I can view my other icons that are hidden on this computer. So that's the system tray. And all of these things here that are icons, they're actually programs that are running on this computer. For example, the Safely Remove Hardware wizard. This is here. It's running on the computer. And if I double click on it, it just immediately comes up and it shows me what hardware is available to be removed. But there's other system tray icons down here. And perhaps these are things you don't want running on your computer because they are taking up system resources. You could go down here and you could close them. For example, one of the things that frequently starts on default Windows installations is the Windows messaging application. That's the instant messenger, Windows Messenger or Microsoft Messenger. That's the instant messenger that comes with Windows. And a lot of times you want to go down there and just close it out or go into preferences and tell it not to start automatically so it's not taking up system resources every time you boot up your computer if you're not going to if you're not planning on using it. So that's the taskbar in the system tray. If you right click on the taskbar, you can go into the properties for the taskbar and you can adjust or customize the taskbar. Next up is the recycle bin. All right, the recycle bin is a special folder that was created, and that's where deleted files and folders go when you delete them in Windows. So this recycle bin is typically located on the desktop. I'm going to minimize our slides. And here on the desktop you see the recycle bin. If I double click on the recycle bin, it shows me the items that are contained inside the recycle bin, and right now there are none. But if I go up a level, and you can see the recycle bins on our desktop, that's the address bar location up here. If I go into my computer, and let's find a file to delete. If I delete this floppy.flp file, say I go over here and I click delete this file, it says, are you sure you want to send this file to the recycle bin? I'll say yes, and it appears that the file's gone, it's deleted. But if I go up and I go to the recycle bin, you can see now this file is located in the recycle bin. So it can't be used anymore, but the recycle bin keeps track of it and does allow you to restore the item, to put it back where it was, or essentially undelete the item. The recycle bin knows where it was originally in the C drive. It knows when it was deleted. It knows the size. It knows the type of file and the date it was modified. So I could restore this item and put it back where it was, or I can empty the recycle bin and this item will be gone forever. So let's talk for just a second about emptying the recycle bin. When you empty the recycle bin and a file's gone, sometimes there are third-party applications that can be used to go out there and to recover that file, even though it has been deleted and emptied from the recycle bin. And that's because when it's emptied from the recycle bin, the file itself is still on the hard drive, but the entry in the file allocation table that points to that file is deleted. So the file's still there, but just the pointer that points to it is gone. And then what will happen over time is as you add more files, they might overwrite this file that was previously deleted. But if I just delete it and then I instantly go out there and I use a file recovery utility to scan the hard drive, I will find the file and be able to get it back some way. Now, the data might be useful, it might not be useful. A lot of times this type of thing is used by the police or the FBI when they confiscate, a potential criminal's computer to search the hard drive for, incriminating evidence, even if they deleted the file. Or sometimes it's used by people who, delete a very, very important file and are willing to pay for the utility or pay for an expert to recover that file for them. But keep in mind that you have the recycle bin and it's included in Windows, and when you delete something, that's where it's going to be. It'll be in the recycle bin until the recycle bin is emptied. Those items will remain. So I'm going to go ahead and restore that. Put that back where it is. Let's go double check, make sure it really showed up, and there it is right there. Floppy.flp has been restored back to my C drive. All right, so we talked about the recycle bin. Next, let's talk about user profiles. A user profile is where the user-specific settings are stored. So for example, the profile is all my specific desktop colors, my background, my sounds, my sound theme, my display theme, how fast my mouse goes, my particular documents and files and folders. All those things are contained inside my user profile. And by default, these user profiles, let me show you where they're stored. If you go into My Computer, go to the C drive, and go into Documents and Settings. This Documents and Settings directory is where the user profiles are stored. So for example, here's my user profile, David Davis. If I go inside here, all these folders and files located inside that directory go together. When put together, this is my user profile. All these things in here, these are my user profile, or they're part of my user profile, I should say. Now the My Documents directory right here that contains all my documents, that's inside my user profile, but that's just part of it. Other important things in here might be local settings. If I go in local settings, there's temporary data, there's history for Internet Explorer. Let's see what else is in here. Windows might put some temporary files in the Windows directory. There's cookies from Internet Explorer. There's my recent documents if I go in here. These are the recent documents that I have opened up. If I go to Start and Documents, this list right here is retrieved from this list right here that's inside this recent documents folder. Now notice all the icons here that are kind of grayed out. Those are hidden folders. Those are system hidden folders. And because I went up to Tools and Folder Options and told it to display all hidden files and folders, that's the only reason I can see these. So if you go into your documents or your profile directory, you don't see, say, the recent folder. That's because you don't have display hidden files enabled. So if I go up, there's also profiles for administrator. Administrator has his or her own profile, and then the all users profile. The all users profile is combined with my profile when I log on to make a complete profile. For example, if I go into David Davis and I go into the start menu, this start menu right here is what controls the start menu down here. So if I go into start menu and then I go into programs, I don't have many particular programs all to myself. If I go up inside all users and I go into start menu and I go into programs, there's more programs in here. And these combined with mine create the total cumulated programs in this list here. So my apps are combined with the all users apps, and my accessories are combined with the all users accessories to create a complete list of all apps, all accessories, all startup items, and so on. All right, so that's a profile. That's the user-specific settings. So now let's move on to our next slide. Now let's talk about disks. In specific, we're going to talk about partitions. Types of partitions are primary partitions, extended partitions, and logical partitions. Partitions are formatted with a file system. For example, NTFS is the common file system used with Windows XP. And to look at partitions and how drives are formatted, you should go to the Disk Manager. To access Disk Manager, you go to Start, you can go to Settings, Control Panel, and then Administrative Tools, and Computer Manager will take you to the Disk Manager. There's a couple different ways to get in here, but I'm going to type on Disk Management, and we'll maximize this window. And then let's take a look and see what we have here. So here I have my C drive. It says the layout is a partition. It's a basic partition. It has been formatted with the NTFS file system. Its status is healthy, and it's a system partition. So this is where the computer boots from. It has 74.52 gigabytes and 19 gigs free. It has no software fault tolerance. Windows does support software fault tolerance, meaning I could put this same partition on another partition down here, and if one goes out, the other one keeps going, and the system never goes down. So here, if I do properties on my C drive, you can go in here and you can see the percent of free space and used space in the pie chart. I can go in here to Tools, and I can perform things like error checking, defragmentation, and backups. I can go down here and I can choose to format a partition. It says this is an active partition. Are you sure you want to format it? I'm going to say no. I don't want to lose all my data. Just an example. I can choose to delete a partition, and if I had the option here, if I had free disk space, I could choose to add a new partition. The properties of this are that it's an NTFS partition. Notice the blue down here tells you that this is a primary partition as well. So let's close Disk Manager for now, and let's go back and talk a little bit more about these different types of partitions. Now let's talk about partitions. Disk partitions are created as logical divisions of a single hard drive. In other words, the partitions make a hard drive seem like multiple hard drives to different operating systems. So I could take a single hard drive and create two partitions on that hard drive and install Windows on one partition and say Linux on another partition. Now typically what most of us do is we take our single hard drive, we create a single partition across the entire hard drive, and we install, say, Windows XP on that partition. So that's typically how partitions are used. But it's important to know that you can have multiple partitions on a single hard drive. You can do dual booting, and you can create those partitions with different types of formats. So those are some important facts about partitions. There's some different types of partitions. First off, there's primary partitions. Primary partitions are what the operating system boots off of. And typically a hard drive can contain as many as 4 partitions. However, there's only a single active primary partition. And then there are extended partitions. Extended partitions are secondary to the primary partition, and typically a hard drive can contain only a single extended partition. Now that extended partition is broken up into multiple logical partitions. And each of these logical drives or logical partitions are formatted, and then each one of those logical drives to the operating system is its own hard drive and its own drive letter. So extended partitions are very useful if you need more than 4 partitions on a single drive. The number of logical drives is not limited, but under Windows, of course, you have an effective limit because you can only have so many different drive letters. All right, now let's move on and let's talk about formatting your hard drive with a file system. So let's move to the next slide and talk about formatting these partitions, or if you only have a single partition on your hard drive, you're formatting the whole drive with a file system. So first off, what is a file system? A file system is a partition that's been taken and formatted with a certain type of file system. And that file system is used to take the folders and files that are in the file system and organize them in such a way so that there's an index, and the large files and folders can be broken up into multiple chunks or pieces inside that disk. And then those pieces, they can all be intermingled as the data is removed and as it grows and is changed. And the table, the master file table or the file allocation table, is used to allocate the blocks across the disk and sort of serve as an index to know where all the different pieces are and be able to quickly find those files and folders on that hard drive. Additionally, the file system will provide things like security and auditing and permissions to those different files and folders. So it's important to know what kind of file system you have to know what kind of security you have, what kind of options and auditing, let's say, you have for a particular disk drive. There's a couple different file systems I want to talk about specifically. The first one is FAT32. FAT32 is supported by Windows XP, as well as a number of the other Windows operating systems. It was first introduced with Windows 95 Release 2, and previously the primary file system for Windows was called FAT, or FAT16. But FAT32 offered a number of improvements, more volume and cluster sizes so that you could get more data, or you could create larger partitions on a disk drive. Now with FAT32 you can support up to 2 terabytes on a single disk drive in theory, but the largest partition size is 32 gigabytes. So you can support drives up to 2 terabytes, but the partitions are limited to 32 gigabytes. Now, one limitation of FAT32 is that there's no native file level security. So When it comes down to the single individual file, you can't set security or permissions on an individual file. It's more on the share level or the folder level. It does not support compression or encryption like NTFS does. Now, primarily today, most Windows computers use NTFS, and that's the next file system I want to talk about. NTFS today, the version number is NTFS 5. Even Windows 2000 today uses NTFS 5. So does XP, so does Vista, so does Windows 2003 Server. Even Windows NT4 using Service Pack 4 later can read NTFS 5 file systems. Now, some of the features of NTFS 5 are file and folder level permissions, encryption, compression, and you can set disk quotas. There's also other features like indexing and mounted drives and hard links. NTFS 5 is really the state-of-the-art standard for Windows file systems today. Now, NTFS also supports transaction logging and recovery, so that if updates are being made to a hard drive and say that the operating system crashes, when the computer reboots, the NTFS file system won't be corrupted. NTFS does not restrict the number of entries in the root folder, like the C drive, to 512 entries, like FAT32 did. With Windows 2000 and Windows XP, you can format partitions up to 2 terabytes in size using NTFS, and it supports native encryption called EFS, or encrypted file system, to support or to prevent unauthorized access to files. Now, an interesting thing about NTFS is that you cannot format a floppy disk with NTFS. And finally, I want to point out that NTFS volumes can theoretically be as large as 16 exabytes, but the practical limit is really 2 terabytes for an NTFS volume. So that's NTFS, and that's what we're going to cover on file systems. Now let's move on and talk about directories. So directories are also called folders in Windows. Back in DOS, directories were called directories. But with Windows, they began calling directories folders. So what do you need to know about folders? Well, folders are just a repository for a file. So if you think about your filing cabinet, you open the drawer on your filing cabinet, and inside there you have folders, file folders. And inside those folders are your files or your documents. So with Windows, it's the exact same concept. A folder is just a repository for files. It allows you to organize them better and not have 10,000 files all in one file drawer. So if your file cabinet didn't have any folders and it was just full of papers, it would be very difficult to find a single paper that you might be looking for. Whereas by you putting them in file folders, those folders have tabs, they have names, and you can very quickly go through there, find the folder you're looking for, and then find the file inside. So Windows has the exact same concept. So now let's learn a little bit about how to create folders, how to navigate through folders, how to move, copy, or rename folders. So I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to go to my computer. I'm going to go to the C drive, and on this C drive, I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to go to New, and then Folder. And you notice it looks just like a file folder in a file cabinet. It's got the little tab on the top. It's kind of tan, like a manila folder. So I'm going to click New Folder, and by default it names it New Folder, in fact. But I can give it any name I want. So I'm just going to call it My Folder. So there's My Folder, and notice it has the same icon here. Over here it says that it's a file folder. If I double click on that, I go in here. By default, it's an empty folder. There's nothing inside it. There's no files. Notice up on the top here it says address is C:\my folder. Same thing up here on the address bar. And those are settings that I've set inside my folder options. So inside the folder here, I can right click, I can go to New, and I can say create a new text document. And I'm just going to click here, and I'll create an empty text document. So if I go up, right here, it puts them in alphabetical order. So here's my folder. It says it's a file folder, has the date it was created on. I can right click on it. I can go to properties, and here it tells me inside there's one file, there's 0 folders inside, and there's 0 bytes contained inside the folder. Here I can set permissions on sharing this folder across the network, or I can set security on this folder so that only certain people could access it. I can also, for example, change the picture on the folder to some other picture that I'd like to be displayed on the folder. Notice I just put that banner across the folder. So let's refresh this. And if I go in here, here's my new text document. I go back, there's my folder. What else can we do to it? Oh, by the way, the banner that I put on there is only going to be displayed if I change the type of view I have. So if I go to thumbnails, notice it shows me that there. If I go to icons, it doesn't show it. If I go to tiles, it doesn't show it. List doesn't show it either. So it's really only the thumbnails that are going to show the customization I did to the folder. Let's go into properties here. Let's see what else we can customize. I can change the icon for folders, or for this folder. Let's see. Let's pick that icon. So inside thumbnails, it still shows the picture that I set on there. But if I go to details, notice how I did change the icon there from my folder. Let's go to properties. And we can restore to default. And here we can restore to default. That'll go away in just a second. There we go. We're back to the default. So you can also change, let's go back here. You can also change what kind of folder do you want this to be. By default, this is a folder that holds documents. But you could set this up to be a folder that holds pictures or photos or music or videos. And then Windows will help you manage those items because it knows what type of items are inside that folder. So say I wanted to copy this, I can copy it and paste it just like any other file that I want to copy. So I can copy, I can right click here, and I can click paste. And I just made a copy of my folder. And I can go in there and notice that the new text document that I created before was automatically copied. So now I have 2 copies of the new text document. And these files here that are hidden, notice how they're kind of grayed out. These are special system files that are contained inside the folder and automatically created. So if I go in here and I turn off the viewing of hidden files, do not show hidden files and folders, notice how those documents immediately go away. If I go back one level, notice how in my C drive there's so many fewer files than there were before because I turned off the hidden files, the viewing of hidden files. So now I have my folder and I have copy of my folder. Let's see, what else can we do to these? I can cut it. So if I wanted to move it, I could cut this. I could go into copy of my folder and I could right click and I could paste it in here. So now inside copy of my folder, I have my folder. And if I double click on that, notice I have C:\copy of my folder / my folder. And I have the new text document inside there, and I have the new text document inside there. So just an example of moving it. Typically you do a cut, to move, you do a cut and then a paste. To copy, you do a copy and then a paste. So that's folders. They're very simple. Once you understand the basics, pretty much you've learned everything you need to know about folders. So let's close that out. Let's go back to our slides. All right, so we talked about directories, which are also called folders. Let's see, one thing I didn't hit on is how to rename them. Let's go back and let me show you how to rename them. I want to make sure you don't miss anything that could be important. So here's copy of my folder. To rename it, I can either select it, and then I can go over here to rename this folder, and then I can change the name to David's folder. I can also right click on it, just an alternate way to do it, and go to rename and call it my folder. I can also click on it and then do a delayed click and click again. So let me try that one more time. So I click and then click again with a delayed click and rename it back to David's folder. So that's how you rename. And then to delete, of course, you just delete it like any other file. Over here, instead of cutting and pasting or copying and pasting, you can actually do moves. So if we did this move, it'll ask me where I want to move it. I could move it to my desktop and click move. Notice how it's gone from there. If I close this out, here it is now on my desktop, David's folder. And then say I want to delete it. I can right click and I can go to delete, or I can simply drag it over and drop it into the recycle bin. Notice how now there's a document in the recycle bin. If I right click on it, I can say empty recycle bin. It says, are you sure you want to delete David's folder? I'll say yes. And David's folder is gone. All right. So that's directories or folders. Now let's talk about files. All right. So what do you need to know about files? How do you create them? What are file extensions, attributes, permissions? How do you move, copy, or rename files? So let's minimize this. And right here on our desktop, I'm just going to create a file. So if I right click, I go to new, and I'm just going to create a new text document. And then I'll just click over here and just leave it with that name. So this is a file. It's just a regular file. There's special kinds of files. Notice over here, I have shortcuts. You can tell a shortcut by that little arrow right there. So those are shortcuts. This is a shortcut to a program. This is a shortcut to a folder. And then this is a regular file. And the icon that's on here is controlled by the extension. So in the case of this file, it has a .txt or a text extension. And that's how it knows that this is going to have an icon that looks like a text, a notepad. It also knows that when I double click this, it launches the notepad application. And that's because it has a .txt extension. So if I right click on this file, I can do a few different things with it. I can open it, print it, edit it. I have convert to Adobe here because I've installed a special application called Adobe Acrobat. Normally, by default, you would not have that. I can choose to open with different applications, a variety of applications I have on my computer. I can choose to send it to different places. I can choose to cut it. Say I wanted to move it. Just like we moved the file, we cut it, and then we pasted it. I could choose to copy it. So I could copy it and then paste it. I could choose to create a shortcut to this file. Let's click on that. And here I just created a shortcut to my new text document. You can see that with the little arrow that's right there. So if I double click this, it opens the new text document. So now I could take this shortcut and I could cut it and go over here and go to my computer, to the C drive, and paste it in here. Now there I have a shortcut to the new text document. Notice it says it's a shortcut, and if I double click on it, it opens the original document that's over on the desktop. So it's just like a pointer. So that's a special type of file there. All right, let's delete that shortcut. Say yes. And here's a logo right here, a little GIF image. Let's look at the properties of that. If I go to the properties, notice it says the type of file is a GIF image. So it's a graphic file. And it knows what to open it with. It knows to open it with Internet Explorer. I can choose to change that if I want. And change the recommended program, let's say, to Microsoft Paint. So now when I double click on that, it's going to open Microsoft Paint. Tells me the size, when it was created, when it was last modified and last accessed. Here are the attributes. Every file has these attributes. You can set this file to be read-only, and once that's turned on, if someone else opens it, or if you open it, it can't be changed. But that doesn't keep someone from just going in and removing the read-only and then changing it. So it's not a permission, it's just an attribute. You can set it to be hidden, and of course if you go into folder options, you can say that you want to view hidden files, and anyone can view a hidden file. So it's not there for security as much as it is just as an attribute, just to hide it. Maybe you don't want to see it. If you go into advanced, there's some other attributes that can be set, like compression or encryption or indexing. Now if you go into the security tab, here are where you set permissions. So let's say I click on everyone here. What does everyone have in terms of this logo that we're looking at? Well, notice how the buttons down here are grayed out, but they actually do have those permissions. Everyone has the ability to modify, read and execute, read this file, or write to this file. And the reason that those are grayed out is because they were inherited. And that's a bit of a more advanced topic right now that we're not going to cover until later. But these permissions were inherited from the folder that the file is inside. But say I wanted to add a certain user, I could assign them just, for example, read-only permissions, or only modify, or only write permissions, read and write, let's say, so that the person couldn't, for example, delete the file. So those are permissions, and the permissions can be assigned to groups of people. For example, these permissions here are assigned to users, which is a group of people. There are special users like everyone and system, and then there's individual users like me, D. Davis. So that's permissions, and permissions can be set in NTFS file systems on files or folders. If you go to summary here, it tells you some information about this file. It knows it's a graphic file, so it tells you the width, the height, the resolution, and the bit depth. But if I go to some other document, like here's a text document, and I go to properties and I go to summary, it tells me different information like the title, the subject, category, author. So different types of file have different characteristics. All right, so we talked about attributes, permissions, how to move, copy, or rename. I want to make sure we touch on a little bit more on file extensions. So if I minimize this, let's go into Tools and Folder Options, and there's a special tab right here called File Types. And I want to make sure you understand, like we were talking about text files and how the .txt extension is there, and it knows to use that to open up Notepad when you double click on the document, and also to show the icon as a little notepad. Well, if we scroll down here in this File Types extension inside Folder Options, I want to show you the TXT extension. Oh, right here. So see the little notepad and the TXT extension, and it says the file type is a text document. So basically the name of the file has to end in a period and then the letters TXT. By having that extension on there, Windows recognizes that file as a certain type of file and knows what to do with it. In Windows, file extensions are very important. Any file that ends in .jpg or JPEG or GIF, GIF, or BMP, those are all graphics files, and they'll be opened with, for example, either Internet Explorer or Microsoft Paint. If you have a text file, it's open with Notepad. If you have a doc file, it's open with Microsoft Word. If you have a .xls file, it's open with Microsoft Excel. All these file extensions, they're called, at the end of the file names are used extensively to know what application to open, to filter the files sometimes for security, to know what icon to display on the file. They're used for a variety of different things. And if you scroll through this list of registered file types, you'll find out there's hundreds of different file extensions. So if you wanted to change the file extension here to open something other than Notepad, you could do it. You could create new file extensions. You could remove file extensions. It's a more advanced topic than what this video covers, but I just want you to understand that at the end of file names, there are these extensions. They're usually 3 characters, like txt, and they have special meanings. They have special importance to the Windows operating system. All right, back on our slides. We just finished talking about files. Now let's move on to our next slide. And in this slide, I want to talk about how do I use the Windows of Windows. Well, if you've used Windows even a little bit, you've probably done a few of these things before, but you might not have done all these things. And I'd be willing to bet that even some folks who have used Windows for a while will learn something out of this slide and what I'm about to teach you. First off, for any Microsoft Windows normal application, on the top right-hand corner up here, you'll have these 3 boxes. So the first one is called Minimize, and it looks like a little underline, that little dash. When I click on that, the application is minimized, which means it's brought out of the primary window and sent down to the taskbar. Now if I click on it in here in the taskbar, it's restored, which just means it's put back to how it was before. It doesn't necessarily mean it's maximized or it's full screen. It's just put back to how it was before. Since mine was full screen before, I minimized it. Now it's restored back to full screen. The second box here is restore down. So restore down just means to move the window back to the size and position that it was at before it was maximized. So restore down just shrinks it down to whatever size it was before it was brought into the maximized window. And then when the window is restored down, the second box here, the middle box, changes to maximize. So if I click on that maximize, the window is brought into the maximized mode, if you want to call it that. It's brought into full screen. And I caution you by saying I caution myself from saying full screen, because full screen means exactly that, the whole screen, meaning you can't even see the start button. But that's really what it is to most Windows users, is full screen. Then the third box over here is close. And if I click on that X, this application is going to close out. I'm going to end this application. And whatever I was doing will either be saved or lost, depending on the application. So there's minimize, restore, or maximize, and then close. So if someone says to minimize the application, you should know that's what they want you to do. If someone says restore the application, you should know how to get it back. You can either click on it down here, or you can right click down here, and you can choose to do different things like restore, maximize, or close. So I'm going to maximize it. It's brought back. Or of course the X closes it. Now the clickable title bar, that's something else I want to talk about. If I double click on this title bar up here, this is called the title bar, by the way. That's the area between these buttons and this button over here. And if I click on this, I'm selecting this application. So let's say I restore this and I click over here on the desktop. Notice how that turns gray. That's kind of grayed out. It's not as bright as it was. If I click back over here, I select this application by clicking on the title bar. Actually, I could click just anywhere in the application. And this is called the active window, or the active application. And any other applications that might be running are running in the background. So this application here is going to get the most CPU. It's the most important application when it comes to Windows, because you've selected it and it's the one you're using. If I double click on this title bar, it maximizes the application. If I double click on it again, it restores it back. So that's another way of maximizing and restoring. If I click on this button over here, I can do all the same things that I can do if I right click down here. I can choose to move it, which gives me this arrow, and then I can click on the, I have to click on the title bar, move, click on the title bar and I can move it around like this. I can go down here and I can say I want to size it, which gives me the option to resize this window. It's the same as kind of putting your mouse at the edge of the window here at the frame, and you'll get this special arrow. I hope you can see that arrow. If you move it to the bottom, it has an up down and you can size it like this. If you move it on the right hand side, it has a left right and you can size it like this. Or if you move it at the corner, it has a diagonal and it can be sized like this. So some great ways to size your applications, and you could fit, you know, 2 applications on this same window by sizing them just right. See how I did that right there? See the 2 different windows side by side? I could minimize those. I could go down here and I could close this. I could restore this back to how it was, and then maximize it. All right, so that's the clickable title bar. We talked about the resizable border. The menu bar. This is called the menu bar across the top here. Just about every Windows application should have a menu bar. In this menu bar, typically you have File is your first choice, where you have options like opening and closing documents, saving and exiting the application. The second option in a menu bar is typically Edit, where you have Cut, Copy, Paste, and Find. The third option is typically View. These other options here are different depending on the application. In the window, many Windows applications have this window drop down here, which might allow you to choose between different windows in the same application. And then Help is usually the last option on the menu bar, where you have about this product and you have help for the product. All right, so menu bar, active window versus inactive window, we talked about that. Now let's talk about some keyboard functions that are used inside Windows. So the first one is Alt-Tab. Alt-Tab allows you to change between 2 different windows or 2 different applications. So to do this, I'm going to have to open a second window. I'm going to open Internet Explorer. All right, so now I have Internet Explorer open, and I still down here on my taskbar, I have OneNote. So if I hold down Alt and I press Tab, it gives me this menu bar where I can choose to move between applications. So if I release at that point, it takes me back to my previous application. If I hold down Alt and hit Tab again, I change back to my Internet Explorer. So Alt-Tab is a quick way to change back and forth between applications. Very powerful, very quick way to do it with your keyboard. Alt-Tab. Now I can hold down Alt and hit Tab a few times, and I can change between multiple applications. So I could Alt-Tab between many different applications. The second one I want to cover is Alt-Shift-Tab. Alt-Shift-Tab just allows me to reverse the changes from one application to another. So it allows me to go backwards. That's all it does. So Alt-Tab moves forward, Alt-Shift-Tab moves backwards. Okay, Alt-Escape. Alt-Escape changes only between active applications. If you have applications that are minimized and they aren't brought up or restored up here, you're not going to change between them. But because both of these applications are restored up in the main screen up here, when I hit Alt Escape, I change between these applications. Now if I had multiple applications, let's try that. Like I'm going to open up Google Images here just to get a different window. Alt Escape changes between all 3 of these. So it's a quick way to change between applications. And then there's the Start menu. Down here, of course, we have the Start menu, but most keyboards today have a button, and if you press that button, it looks like a little Microsoft Windows logo. You press that button, it brings up the Start menu. Another Windows keyboard function I want to talk about is Control-Alt-Delete. If you hold down Control and you press Alt, then you press the Delete key, and that's not to be confused with the backspace key. The Delete key is just above the up arrow and to the left. So Control-Alt-Delete, what this does is it sends an interrupt to your computer, and whatever's going on your computer, the screen will be cleared and a Windows security box will pop up. Now, I can't demonstrate this to you on this computer because the recording software will be interrupted if I actually do it. But what will happen is you'll get an option to log off the computer, shut down, bring up Windows Task Manager, or change your password. I can show you Windows Task Manager. If you right-click down here in the task bar, and you'll get this option for Task Manager. If you click on Task Manager, this is a very powerful utility to show you what processes are running, end processes, show you what applications are running, check out the performance of your CPU, your RAM, or your networking. We'll go into this utility more in our troubleshooting video. All right, for now, let's move on to our next slide. And we're going to talk about some common operating system tasks. All right, first off, let's talk about configuring the taskbar. And we touched on this already. To configure the taskbar, you right-click down here on the taskbar, and you go into Properties. Here's where you can lock the taskbar, choose to show the clock, hide inactive icons, or change the Start menu. The second one is Quick Launch. Quick Launch is this area right here, which can be turned on or off when you configure the taskbar. Now, all these icons here are just shortcuts to these applications. So let's say that I wanted to add a shortcut to my application. So I'm going to minimize my notes here. And earlier we created this text document. Let's say I right-click on it and I select to create a shortcut. I can then take that shortcut and drag it and drop it on the Quick Launch. Now my Quick Launch just got too big to be viewed. So to fix that, what I can do is right-click here, unlock the taskbar, and then I can make the Quick Launch larger. Then I'll relock the taskbar, and now you see my little shortcut to my text document. So I just created a new item on the Quick Launch. If I click on that, it brings up my text document. So I'll close that out, and notice it really didn't move the shortcut down here, it just copied it. So I'm going to delete my shortcut, and that's the Quick Launch. You can actually take these icons, you can click on them, and you can drag them over, and you can reorder them. So typically I like the Show Desktop icon on the far left, and I want to get rid of this Quick Launch button here. I'm going to right-click on it and click Delete. It'll say, are you sure you want to send this shortcut to the recycle bin? I'll say yes. And I can reposition that one there. So that way I can customize my Quick Launch however I want. I can add icons, I can reorganize icons, or remove icons. All right, next up is hiding the taskbar. And I showed you how to do this a little bit earlier. But if you right-click on the taskbar and go to Properties, you can check to auto hide the taskbar. And then the taskbar just seemingly goes away. But if you move your mouse down to the bottom where the taskbar was, the taskbar pops up again. So it's that simple. It'll give you more real estate space here on your screen, and but it can be confusing to people who aren't used to having their taskbar hidden. A lot of users will call and say, you know, I can't find my taskbar, it's disappeared, when in reality what they did is they hid it down here in the bottom. So I'm going to right-click on this and go back into Properties and uncheck that checkbox. All right, next on the list is changing the background, the screensaver, and the theme. To do that, I'm going to show the desktop, and to change anything having to do with the desktop, the screensaver, or the theme, you just right-click on the desktop, go into Properties. Now with themes, you can do a drop-down here, and you can select from different themes. For example, right now I have this modified theme because I changed the background from the default. But I can also go to Windows XP theme, which changes back to the defaults. I can go to the Windows Classic theme, which looks like an old Windows 3.1 interface. And I can go browse more themes either online or on my hard drive. Now a theme is a background plus a set of sounds, icons, and other elements grouped together under the name of a theme. So, there's themes that have to do with a certain TV show, and you'll get the sounds from the TV show, the background, and your icons will all turn into things having to do with that TV show. That's an example of a common theme someone might download from the internet for their home computer. So how to change your background, that's done here under desktop. So under desktop, I can choose, whatever background I want. As I scroll through here and click on these, it shows me what my background might look like. Let's go ahead and enable this one by clicking apply. And I just changed to the fish background. I can choose to stretch it across my entire screen. I can choose to tile it or center it. And depending on the size of the background, it'll look different. For example, let's see here. For example, this one is just a small graphic. Notice here it's just that small coffee bean graphic. And if I choose to center it, it just goes right in the center of the desktop. If I tile it, it's tiled across the desktop. And if I stretch it, it looks very poorly because it's a small icon that's been stretched across the desktop. So in my case, I prefer the no background, and I just choose to change the color of the background over in the appearance. So I'm going to apply that back to how it was, and but I do want my train signal, my trusty train signal logo on there, and let's see if it's in here anywhere. No, I don't see it. Looks like we lost it. So to get that train signal logo back on there, let's pretend that this is a photo. Could be of a family member, or your company logo, or some photo you downloaded from the internet. To get that back on, I'm going to browse, and I'm going to find the picture that I want. Let's see, I put it on my computer, the C drive, and let's see if it's this logo. You can actually view these by going to thumbnails, and here's the logo I want, this main logo tan. I don't want it stretched, I want it centered. I apply that, and there we go. We're back in business. We have our train signal logo. Notice that things have changed a little bit because my color's different. Well, how's my color different? Let's choose to customize that. If you go into other here, you can choose from different colors. For example, this one looks a little bit closer to what it was before. I'm going to apply that. That's a little too dark. But you get the idea here. You get the idea of how your colors and your backgrounds can be customized. And then for screensaver, you can choose whatever screensaver you want. You can even download screensavers from the internet. Screensavers are there to protect your monitor from getting burnt in. This isn't a problem as much as it used to be with the old CRT monitors, but still it's good to have a screensaver. You can also use a screensaver for security purposes by checking this checkbox here, so that when someone tries to use the computer again after the screensaver has kicked in, they must enter the password of the currently logged in user. Now under appearance here, I can choose to change, basically whatever I want. The color of the boxes, the font of the text, whatever it is I want to choose. But themes, like we said, themes affect all these different things: sounds, screensavers, desktops, and appearances. So let's go back to, see if we can go back to the theme we had before. There we go. That looks a little bit more like it now, doesn't it? Much better, much better. All right, so we talked about changing the background, screensaver, and theme. Let's talk about speeding up the mouse. To configure the mouse, you go to Start, Settings, Control Panel, and then to Mouse. I like my mouse to move very quickly, and that's why I set the motion here as fast as possible. You might like it to move a little bit slower or faster. There's a lot of different mouse options that can be configured. That's just something common that a user might request you configure on their computer. All right, killing programs. To kill programs, you bring up the Task Manager. You right-click on the taskbar and go into Task Manager, or you can press Control-Alt-Delete. You go in here to Applications. You click on the application you want to end, and you click End Task. It'll come up and say basically you're about to end the application. Are you sure? You select End Task again, and the application's gone. Let me show you how this works. So if I close this out, and I bring up my new text document, I go back to Task Manager. There's my text document. Here I'm going to click End Task, and notice how the Notepad application just disappeared. All right, how to change your password. Well, if you press Control-Alt-Delete, you'll be given the option to change your password. But as administrator, you can go into, let's go into Control Panel here. And you can go into user accounts and you can change your own password or other users' passwords. This is the simplified, user account view. If I click on myself, I can click here to change my password. And this is a different view of this than what you would get in the computer management application. Or if you're working on a domain, you would have an application called Active Directory Users and Computers. So here I'm going to click Change My Password. Here I have to type my current password and then my new password twice before I click Change Password. It's that simple. And then finally, logging on and logging off. When you log on a computer, it loads your profile, all your personal settings, desktop, backgrounds, points you to My Documents, which are your custom documents. Of course, to log on, you have to type your username and password, typically, especially if you're in a corporate environment like a Windows domain. Then, whenever you're done using your computer, you should log off. You should always log off for security purposes. You don't want someone walking up and using your computer behind you and sending an email out with your name on it, telling everyone to jump off a bridge, or some other malicious activity like sending out a virus. So to log off a computer, you go down here to Start, and you click Log Off. The computer will save all your open files, close your profile, and then you'll be given the Log On screen again. Press Control-Alt-Delete to log on. So that's logging on and logging off. Now let's move on and let's touch on system files. All right, in the system files section, earlier we talked about the registry data files. We talked about those in the registry section. The registry data files are edited with regedit. Let's move on and let's talk about the boot INI. The boot INI is used to allow you to choose the operating system that you want to boot from. So if you don't have, or if you only have a single operating system on your computer, you're not interested in the boot INI because you don't have multiple operating systems to choose from, or if you're not having any problems with your computer, you really don't have any need for the boot INI. But the boot INI allows you to choose from either multiple operating systems or a single operating system, but with different options such as safe boot or other boot options. The NT loader is the boot loader, but it's not present in Windows Vista, only in Windows XP and some of the other Windows operating systems. It's located in the root of the active disk partition. It reads the boot INI, and if XP is selected, it runs ntdetect.com. It then runs the NTOS kernel, the HAL DLL, it reads the registry, and then loads device drivers. So the NT loader is a very important piece of the Windows boot process. ntdetect.com is used to get information about the hardware run by NT loader. The NT boot DDSys is used to boot Windows from SCSI disk devices. So if you don't have a SCSI hard drive, you're not going to be using NT boot DD. All right, if you're interested in further operating system training, you can go to trainsignal.com, and there's some excellent videos that cover Windows XP, Linux, and Windows 2003 Server. These videos go into great depth, many hours of video with hands-on labs, and I highly recommend them. For the purposes of the A+ certification, we just finished covering the essentials of the Windows operating system. We'll also be covering installing and troubleshooting the Windows operating system. I point out the further operating system training if you'd like to go much more in depth into these different operating systems. So in conclusion, we've reached the end of our operating system introduction video. In this video, we learned about the history of operating systems, the current operating systems in use today, some important operating system terminology. We learned about file systems, directories, folders, and files. We learned the basics of using Windows, minimizing, maximizing, restoring, logging on, logging off, Control-Alt-Delete, Alt-Tab. We learned how to run Task Manager and kill misbehaving applications. We learned how to perform some other important common operating system tasks. We learned how to empty the recycle bin, get rid of the trash. We learned about copying, deleting, renaming, and moving files and folders. And we learned about the important operating system files like the Windows registry. So with that, we've reached the end of Introduction to Operating Systems as part of the A+ exam essentials. Thank you very much.